Wednesday show. Wednesday show. Wednesday show. That's the sound of lightning because, Halloween. This is Halloween. This is Halloween. 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 In this town we call home. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know if anyone's out there. It is the day before Halloween, so we're going to be doing a Halloween style episode tonight. But first, we'll see if anyone shows up because otherwise, it's just me sitting here trying to figure things out and talking to myself for the next hour. I do anyways, so might as well record it. Um, there we go. Hello, hello. Everyone hail to the Pumpkin King in this town we call home. My favorite part is the meow, 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 meow. How's everyone doing? Are you guys doing good? Hopefully everyone's doing well today. So today it is the day before Halloween. So because of that, tonight we're going to be doing. Oh, thank you. It's Minnie, Clarabelle Cow, and Daisy as the Sanderson sisters. It was from the Halloween half marathon that was just a few months ago here. No, we usually do our walkthrough for Christmas, but I think I've only done the Halloween walkthrough one time ever. Plus, so it is a race weekend right now. So because it's a race, well, this coming up weekend's a race weekend. So because it's a race weekend, I already have one of my friends in town, and we were at Epcot literally 22 minutes ago. I was leaving the parking lot of Epcot and had to get over here. It's a lucky thing that I live close because I got here 11 minutes to spare before the show started. So had enough time. You got to admit to the hospital tonight. Are you okay? Hopefully everything okay. Well, hopefully over the next hour, we can help lift your spirits as we talk about ghostly spirits. That's a good one. So, who talks like that to themselves? That's a good one, Brent. Pat on the back. Okay, so yeah, tonight what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going through and talking all about the Haunted Mansion over at Walt Disney World. We will be talking a little bit about Disneyland and the other haunted mansions around the world as well in honor of Halloween. We're going to be talking about the ride. The ride. I love the 2023 movie. It's scary and cool, and it has many references. I think the 2023 film is really well done. I think Muppet Haunted Mansion is extremely well done. If you guys not watched that, it is on Disney Plus. It came out 2 years ago, and it is definitely worth the watch. Like, I personally love it. I think it's just a great one. Okay, so let's get this party started. We'll answer this question real quick here. What's your favorite candy? I want everyone to write down their favorite candy in the chat room as well. My personal favorite candy is peanut butter M&Ms. Oh, I absolutely love them. I keep a jar of it over next to my the chairs that I watch TV at because I just absolutely love peanut butter M&Ms. They are the best candy in the world. I like the short about the columns look like the cat. Isn't that a cool little detail? But we're going to be talking a lot about the different details about the Haunted Mansion tonight. We're going to be talking about the storyline. We're going to be talking about the history. We're going to be talking about a lot of things. And we have so much to go through that we might as well just get this party started right now as people continue to throw their favorite candies into the chat room. Keep on throwing them in there because I'm curious. I love candy so much. Actually, my friend brought me to... Oh, it's just out of reach. My friend brought me to the Disney Vacation Club Halloween party the other day. If you saw my pictures on Instagram, or if you saw my short on YouTube of Donald dancing, and over there they gave us a lot of candy, and some of it was peanut butter M&Ms, and I was extremely happy. Reese's Peanut Butter Cups and peanut butter M&Ms. Right after peanut butter M&Ms, my second favorite is Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. So I just love peanut butter. I love peanut butter. Okay, let's get this party started. We're going to start the 793rd episode of the Wednesday show in 5, 4, 3, 2. Welcome, foolish mortals, to the Haunted Mansion. No, welcome everyone to the 793rd episode of the Wednesday Show. Today is October 30th, 2024, and I am your host, your Brent Dodge. Tonight we will join all around the staircase. I don't know why I would say staircase, but apparently we're going to the staircase to talk all about the amazing, the super duper, the always incredible Haunted Mansion attraction. But of course, before we get to that, let's talk about our news for the week. First off, thank you everyone out there who's been joining us for our Saturday in the Park. If you didn't already know, every single Saturday we do a live broadcast from someplace found throughout the Walt Disney World Resort. You never know where we're going to be coming to you from, but I promise you we will always be coming to you from someplace around the Walt Disney World Resort. This coming up Saturday, however, we will still be going live, but this is also one of those things that I do apologize in advance because it's happened multiple times. We will be coming to you live, but it is a race weekend, so I may forget to go, or I'll probably be sleeping from after the 10K. I usually come back, I edit my videos, and then I take a nap. And because of that, sometimes our broadcast is extremely delayed, or sometimes I just completely forget that it's Saturday and I forget to do it. So I apologize in advance if I do forget, but I'm going to do my best to have it. Make sure that you want to watch that broadcast on Saturday. Make sure that you are subscribed and you also have those notifications on, so it lets you know when we go live from the park. Also, as always, we are looking for more subscribers as we go through here. We will go into more innings as the evening goes on if we go into more subscribers. Our starting number is 8,086 subscribers. So keep sending your friends over here. If we get up to 8,087, that'd be awesome. 8,088, even better. 8,000, we're not going to keep on going through all the numbers. 10,000, perfect. Okay. And of course, as always, tonight's episode is sponsored by our Patreon pals. Just keeping up with the Haunted Mansion theme here. Okay. So let's talk about the Haunted Mansion, the amazing Haunted Mansion. So first off, we're going to talk about the entire history of the attraction. We're going to talk a little bit about the Disneyland attraction, and then we're going to go through a breakdown of step-by-step through the Walt Disney World Haunted Mansion. Now, this is not the first time we've done an episode about the Haunted Mansion here on this channel. We've actually done several, but we've also done 793 episodes. So it just makes sense that almost every single year around Halloween time, we come back to this classic spooky attraction that had its foundings way, way back with the Mickey Mouse theme park days. So let's get started. So if you have not joined us for history lessons in the past, we have talked a lot about the Mickey Mouse theme park. So the Mickey Mouse theme park was going to be this theme park that Walt Disney wanted to have on the actual Disney studio lot. So when you were going through, you would see like soundstage, animation building, and then a theme park for guests to just kind of, go to. It was one of those things that a lot of other movie studios did have it. So there was different tours that they could go through. And Walt thought that this might be the next big thing of actually having a theme park there on property. Now, when he came up with this idea, there was a lot of classic things that you would find eventually at Disneyland or different Disney parks around the world. He had things like a railroad that went out around the entire thing. He had a steamboat, which, Rivers of America. And then one attraction just kind of stood out in the very far corners, the outreaches of the entire park. And it just simply was called the Haunted House. Now, the idea of the Haunted House was around in this Mickey Mouse theme park idea. However, when they came to the concept idea of Disneyland back in the early 1950s, they said, what we're going to do? We're going to have this amazing place called Disneyland. And in Disneyland, we are going to have a haunted house. That's right. Opening day, let's have a haunted house to kind of spook people, kind of scare people, and make them wonder, why is this inside of a Disney park? But of course, at that point, we didn't really have a concept of what a Disney park would entail. So the idea of a scary attraction, it just kind of made sense. And plus, haunted house attractions were extremely popular at this time, all around the country, especially around Halloween time. So a lot of people wanted to get that little fright on, and Disney said, we might as well make a little bit of money off this as well. So when Disneyland first opened up, the haunted house attraction did not exist. That's right. They said, we are not going to have this attraction yet because we just don't know what we're going to do with it. So the Imagineers started to go through and try to figure out different storylines that would take place and figure out exactly where this could be inside of the park. So all of this was kind of being tossed around, but they didn't really have any solid plans of what attraction was going to be there. They just knew haunted house equals good and someplace in the park equals good as well. So the idea was, let's have a side street. We've gone through this multiple times with different attractions like Hall of Presidents and Liberty Square, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they wanted to have a side street off of Main Street, USA, that would feature a haunted house up on a hill. Not a bad idea. However, it just didn't work out the way that they wanted it to. So they never got that little side street, so they wanted to come up with a new concept. Now, right around this time, we started to go through and have it so the idea of an expansion over in the Adventureland, Frontierland part of the park would happen, and that would be a new area called New Orleans Square. Now, with this idea of New Orleans Square, they decided that maybe this was finally our time to bring a brand new attraction, a haunted house attraction, to Disneyland Park. And the idea of this attraction was, let's open it up in 1963. And I know what you're thinking. Wait, the Haunted Mansion's been around since 1963? It has not, but the mansion itself has. So the attraction started to be built for a 1963 opening, but there was a few different issues that they had going on here. Number one, we don't have a storyline. What on earth is this storyline going to be about? We really have no clue what we're going to do an entire attraction about, besides the fact that we want to scare people. So it was decided that they could just have a jump scare attraction where people could walk through and they could have people jumping at them, getting scared, and then running out of the house. Simple attraction, good attraction, but all the way back in the 1950s and the 1960s, Disney was already very concerned about the safety of their guests and their cast members. So when they were coming through and saying, you know what, we don't want to have it so people are jumping out and scaring people, maybe we could come up with a completely different concept to have it so people would be in a safer environment. So the idea was, let's create a storyline about a captain, a sea captain named Captain Bartholomew Gore. So Captain Bartholomew Gore would be a ship captain that would be sailing out in the seven seas. He would be right there in the amazing town of New Orleans. And so when he is going out, he would eventually come back, and he's the richest boat captain around. So he comes back to his ship, or to his house that's on land in New Orleans Square. And when he would come here, he would have this extremely nice, stately manner that everyone would be proud to call home. Now, in addition to the storyline, we also had it so Captain Bartholomew Gore would have a bride who had kind of a twist to her because, yeah, he might be out at sea, but she also might be wanting to kill him. So we had a storyline that started to come around. And then the idea was, okay, we kind of have a solid storyline. Why don't we take a tour through this haunted mansion and have it so there's different weird and different spooky things that are happening while you are walking through this haunted mansion style attraction. So the next concept that they came up with was, who better to give a tour of this mansion than maids and butlers? Now, the maids and butlers are going to be the first thing that really stick around in our entire storyline. The other things we will touch on how Captain Bartholomew Gore is kind of still there. Obviously, the bride is still there, but with a twist. But at the start there, we had it so there was maids and butlers that would be giving us foolish mortals a tour of the entire mansion. Now, this idea was going pretty full force. And in 1963, Walt Disney came up on a television series and said, have no fear, you may have gone to Disneyland sometime in the recent days and seen that there is a mansion here in our new area called New Orleans Square. And yes, it is a haunted mansion, but we are still trying to find different people to come and fill the void. So the idea was to have not one, not two, not three, not four, we could go on for a while, but not 1,000, but 1,001 happy haunts that could be living there. I know what you're thinking, but it's 999. It eventually is. But at the start, it was going to be 1001 happy haunts inside the Haunted Mansion. So Walt Disney on television says, hey, don't worry, we are having it. So we're going around the entire country and gathering all of these happy haunts together to have it so you, the amazing guests coming to Disneyland, will be able to be a little bit terrified while going through this haunted mansion. Now, all of this stuff is working so well, and then something that usually propels us forward took us back. And that, my friends, is the 1964 World's Fair. Now, when we've talked about the 1964 World's Fair in the past, we have talked about how it has helped things like the People Mover. It's brought us things like It's a Small World, Carousel of Progress, and so many other classic things around the parks have been coming to us because of the 1964 World's Fair. But with the additions, it also brought a brand new solution to a problem they were trying to figure out at the Haunted Mansion, but it also delayed the opening of when the Haunted Mansion would open up. And that idea was the idea of an Omni Mover. Now, before this, we didn't really have the idea of an Omni Mover until the 1964 World's Fair, when we had the Ford Motor Speedway, where it would actually continue having it so people could go through on the Speedway in an Omni Mover style attraction. So they decided, you know what, this might be the solution to all of our issues. This could be the solution to have it so we can transport these guests through the mansion. Don't have to worry about the maids and butlers walking you through. We don't have to worry about the safety of people or leaving people behind or people getting too scared, because they will be in an attraction that will take them through the entire mansion. Overall, amazing idea, great idea, and it will work perfectly. However, there were a few things because of this brand new technology that caused a few other hindrances in the plans. Because up until this point, a lot of the things that were being worked on for the mansion were things that could be seen if you were standing in a room and looking at it. So, for instance, there was the ever-burning wax man, a man completely made of wax that was ever burning. He was always constantly burning, and no matter what, you'd be staring at him and he would kind of like move a little bit towards you. But that idea was scrapped because the illusion would only work if you were standing in one spot for a long enough period of time. There were several different things like this that were completely scrapped, and especially a thing called the Museum of the Weird. Now, there was an Imagineer called Raleigh Crump, that was his name. And Raleigh Crump came up with this idea of the Museum of the Weird. Walt Disney loved it. Everyone else did not really like it, but unfortunately for them, Walt Disney loved this idea. So Walt and Raleigh were working on this idea of the Museum of the Weird, which originally was supposed to be things that were inside the attraction itself. But then they decided the best way for them to do this is have it so guests could go through the entire Haunted Mansion, and then at the end, they would exit through a museum called the Museum of the Weird, and it would be all these different things that Raleigh had been working on. Now, every single Imagineer, except for Walt Disney and Raleigh, hated this idea. So when Walt Disney eventually would pass away, this was actually the first thing that Imagineering ever scrapped. They said, we don't like this idea. No, we're not going to do this inside the Haunted Mansion. Completely different story, but we're going to go back to the Museum of the Weird in a little bit when we're actually going through our walkthrough of the entire attraction. This is a long history lesson, but I hope you're enjoying. Continue, class. We're gonna continue. So while they're going through and creating all these different things, they've got the Omni Mover track. You've got the maids and butlers. What are other problems that might arise? Well, the next big one is, yes, you've got this amazing Haunted Mansion there in New Orleans Square, but the problem is we have it so the entire track, if we want to do this entire attraction the way we want to do it, the entire track has to be on the other side of the Disneyland Railroad. There's no way around this. So simple solution is, why don't we work an elevator shaft into the storyline of the Haunted Mansion? So when you're in the stretch room in Disneyland, you are in fact in an elevator that is slowly going down. And then when you exit that elevator, you're walking on a path that is actually going underneath the Disneyland Railroad. However, if you are in Walt Disney World, you are not in an elevator that the walls are actually going up. They actually are stretching, and you are just sitting there on the same level no matter what. Completely besides the point, but we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the stretch room. So everything is set. We've got the ghost, but some people start to do a little bit of research on numbers, and they realize that 1001 just doesn't have a nice ring to it, But maybe, just maybe, if we shorten it up by 2, we can have a really clever idea of having it so we are searching for our 1,000th soul, because the house does house 1,000 ghosts, and we have 999 happy haunts here, but there's room for 1,000. Any volunteers? So we have everything pretty much in place, but we're not completely done yet with our backstory of how we're getting here. Because in addition to all that stuff, we need a theme. Now, the theme of the attraction obviously is spooky, but they want something that's going to tie the entire thing from start to finish. So they bring in 2 different Imagineers to go through and bring this stuff in. We got Mark Davis, who has it so he's got more of a silly sense of humor. And then we also have his name is, I just drew the biggest blank on his name. But we also have Exitensio. We'll get, I'll remember it in like 2 minutes. We also have Exitensio, who would write the music to have it so the entire thing would be musically tied together from start to finish. And then we would also bring in Imagineers like Yale Gracie, aka Master Gracie. Yale Gracie would have it so he would work on lots of different illusions. We're going to talk about those illusions as we're going through the attraction. And we'd also bring in people like Leota Toombs. Her last name actually was Toombs, who would be the model for Madame Leota, and so many other talented people that would work here. But the problem with the attraction, which ended up being also the solution of the attraction, is unlike every single attraction that Disneyland had done up until this point, whether it was the Railroad or It's a Small World or Enchanted Tiki Room, there was always a solid storyline from start to finish on this is what the story is. But because there were so many different people involved, they couldn't figure out the exact solid storyline from start to finish. So when you're actually on the attraction, you might hear this story from one person's point of view, and it might be their storyline that they're figuring out, but it might not be the official storyline because there actually is no official storyline. Yes, we've had a few different Haunted Mansion movies, but nothing is an actual official storyline for the attraction from the Imagineer's point of view. They help have it so you can help figure out what that storyline is from your own point of view. And that, my friends, brings us to 1968, when the Haunted Mansion went to open up over in Disneyland, and they decided while it was being worked on in Disneyland, they knew that Walt Disney World was going to be open. And when they knew Walt Disney World was going to be open, they knew in 1971 they would also have a Haunted Mansion with the exact same themes. So every single thing that was created for the Disneyland attraction was also being worked on the Walt Disney World attraction at the same time. So it was the very first time ever in the history of Walt Disney Imagineering that they worked on one attraction for 2 completely different parks. Yes, they would open up several years apart from one another, but they were being worked on at the same time. The one that's found over at Magic Kingdom is a little bit longer. There's a few more rooms inside of it compared to the Disneyland counterpart, but we're going to focus mainly on the Walt Disney World version starting right now. So how does a story happen? Now, like I said, there are so many different stories going around the backstory of all the different characters that are found here. And I'm going to tell you one of my favorites. This is the one that was told to me when I was a cast member by the tour guide that took us through on we had a program on my college program where it still goes on today. It's for any new cast member that is working at the Magic Kingdom. It's called Once Upon a Time Is Now. It's a lovely title. And Once Upon a Time Is Now has it so you go through with an actual cast member who is an expert on the park, and they walk you through the different details and the different stories of that park. And this cast member said, okay, there is no official storyline for Haunted Mansion. However, I do want to tell you a story about the Haunted Mansion. So he brought us over to Columbia Harbor House, and when he told us the story that you're about to hear, I thought it's a good story. It might be my favorite story that I've ever heard, but it's also not the most believable story. But here's what he told us. So when Walt Disney World was going through, or when Walt Disney Company was going through and purchasing all the different land for the Walt Disney World Resort, there were some houses on there that were removed, and there were some buildings that were there that had to be removed. And when they were going through and purchasing one plot of land, they came across a family who had a nice little mansion up in the north side of the property. And they went up to this family and they said, hey, we're going to give you a bundle of money for your land. And they said, we would love to do that. However, we cannot sell our home because this home has too many sentimental memories to us. And they said, unfortunately, we want your land. So move over, people. And that's when they told the people trying to purchase the land the story. And they said, listen, we will sell you the land, but you need to promise us that you will not tear down our house. And they said, well, we kind of have to tear down the house. And they said, listen, we just need to let you know the story that happened at this house that's unbelievable that most people don't realize. And it's about our son George. I said, your son George, what, like, does he just like really attached to the house? And they go, well, George passed away years ago. Years and years and years ago, George passed away. So these two people said, we're going to hire someone to go out and try to find the spirit of George, because they felt like George had some unfinished business. And because he had unfinished business, he was going to be off as a spirit, as a ghost, wandering the hills and trying to find his purpose in his afterlife. And he was not going to have his final settled business until he did so. So the parents said, George is still out there. We need to find George. So they hired every psychic, every medium, every single type of person that could go out and help find this spirit of George in some way, shape, or form. Eventually, someone found him. They said, hey, listen, we think we found the ghost of George. He's in a field. If you want to join us, we will bring you to George. So the parents went off to this field and they found George. His spirit was there. And they said, George, please, we know you're no longer in the living world, but we want you to be at home. Please come home with your mom and dad. And George said, as much as I would love to come home with you, I just can't. I can't leave the new life that I have, the afterlife that I have. Because when George was off in this field and when he was off on this crazy adventure trying to find out his purpose in the afterlife so he could finally cross over, he started to come across more and more lost souls. And as he came across more and more lost souls, he realized that all of them had one thing in common. They were lost, but they could be together and they could have one another until they each found their own purpose in life. And he said, I can't leave them. I need to have it so they're all together. And George's parents said, well, if you want to, we have a mansion. Like, you can bring all those lost souls to the mansion with us. So George collected all of his friends and they all went back to the mansion. And when that happened, they all lived with George's parents, having a swing and wake. And while they were going through and having this grand old time, that's when eventually the Disney company would come over and say, we want to buy this house. And they said, listen, George and his friends, there's 999 people altogether, or souls altogether, they all live in this house now. So we can't have it so you take them away from us. But if you want, we think that we can try to organize it so George and all the other souls can stay in the house and they will allow people to go through the house. So that is just one story that was told about the Haunted Mansion. There are so many other ones about backstories about it. But let's talk about a few other little backstories here before we actually get to the complete walkthrough. Also, by the way, while we're going through here, because we're about to actually go through the walkway through, if anyone out there has any questions about anything and everything about Haunted Mansion here, start throwing them in the comments below. Otherwise, just continue to sit in stunned silence. So, a few of the other storylines that happened is, of course, about Constance the Bride and how Constance the Bride is killing off all of her husbands. And one of them is George, the one that we just talked about. And while she's going through and killing off all these husbands, at one point she was so mad she threw the ring out the window and the ring landed out in the pavement. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in just a second as well. So let's do a little walkthrough. And when I say a little, I feel like there's a pretty high chance you guys are going to be going into extra innings tonight, whether we get new subscribers or not, because I know I'm going to be rambling a lot as we go through the Haunted Mansion here. I am going to go through and have it so I'm going to have my book, A Closer Look at the Magic Kingdom's Liberty Square here, open on the Haunted Mansion page. So in case I do forget something, I can quickly open it But if you've never read this book is that much of it is what is that? Over 40 pages of the book is just Haunted Mansion. So let's first talk about the opening part of the Haunted Mansion, because the storyline of the Haunted Mansion starts not at Liberty Square, but it's one of the coolest effects in the park. Not even effects. Have you ever been on the ferry boat going from the Ticket and Transportation Center to the Magic Kingdom? And while you're going from the Ticket and Transportation Center to Magic Kingdom, off in the distance, if the wind is just right, you can hear different sounds from the park. You can hear the train whistle. You can hear some of the music from Main Street USA. Maybe you can hear the band playing. Sometimes you can hear some of the music from Tomorrowland. But almost every single time, you can hear the howl of a wolf. And that howl from a wolf is actually the first time that guests really get the hearing, or the first, I was going to say first sight. That doesn't make sense because it's a heard. You first heard, I don't even know what I'm saying right now. If the first time that you have any inkling or any connection to the Haunted Mansion is that the sound of that wolf beckoning you to this Haunted Mansion. As you actually start to walk up to the Haunted Mansion, the Haunted Mansion is actually based off an estate that was created up in New York State. So much like the one that's found over in Disneyland is based around New Orleans, an actual New Orleans mansion. The same thing is found here. If you actually go to New York State, you can actually find a mansion that is very similar to the one that is found here in New Orleans Square. Now, all of the different houses that are all the different buildings that are found inside of New Orleans Square, or no, I'm sorry, Liberty Square, they all pay tribute to different architecture styles in different states around the 13 original colonies. And this is the one that represents New York. So while you're walking up to the Haunted Mansion, there are a few different things that were not originally on that mansion there. If you watched my short from yesterday, you would probably know one of them. And that is, if you look at the front doors, on either side of the front doors, there is 2 columns, and those columns actually are shaped like coffins. And it is that we have a wreath that is on the front door that is dead because it's the Haunted Mansion. As you walk up, we have a few different details that are often walked by. First off, we have the sign that says Haunted Mansion. Most people don't walk by it, or they walk by it and they do pay tribute to that. If you look at the top of it, you can find the face of the devil there. Above you, there is some ironwork. On that ironwork, there is actually the outline of a bat. Again, kind of a spooky thing. Speaking of bats, if you look at the mansion itself, you can find a weather vane. On top of that weather vane, there is, once again, a bat. There is also a long-standing rumor, and sometimes it's said it's confirmed, and sometimes it's said it's not. So it's kind of funny because there is really no... Imagineering has said before, this is 100% a true statement, and then they've also said this is 100% a false statement. So it is also kind of like a lot of the things in the Haunted Mansion where there is no solid storyline. This is one of those things that has no solid proof. But if you look at the mansion itself, you can find nooks and castles and queens and bishops and different pieces of chess pieces that are found out there. Everything except for the knight, and that's because when you're inside the Haunted Mansion, it is always night. This has been confirmed a few times, and it's also been denied quite a few times. Actually, it's been denied more than it's been confirmed. But the confirmation would say that it is because Mark Davis was a huge fan of chess, and he always tried to hide chess in some way, shape, or form in his attractions. For instance, if you've ever gone on Pirates of the Caribbean and you see the 2 pirates that are skeletons playing chess against one another, that was actually done by Mark Davis. They're at a stalemate, and Mark Davis just, he's the chess master. And then this is supposed to be that too. However, if you do look at the mansion that it's based off of, you can also find the same chess pieces up on several different parts of it, which kind of deflects the purpose of it actually being that, not to that. In front of the mansion, we can also find a horse carriage or a horse hearse. And then there's also a horse that you cannot see there because he is a ghost as well. That is there. When you're going through the line, there is a extended queue that opened up on March 24th, 2011, aka my birthday. That's the only reason I remember. So when you're going through this extended queue, before this, you used to just be able to see the hillside, and on that hillside, you would see a few different tombstones paying tribute to different things. And then they realized that they needed to have a little bit more room, so they decided to extend the queue and have it so guests would actually be able to walk through an extended queue. When you're going through the extended queue, there are a few really cool details that need to be observed when you are there. The first thing is you'll pass a family of 6, but there's 5 busts. And on this family of 6, but 5 busts, you can see that in the middle is Uncle Jacob, and Uncle Jacob has a riddle on the bottom talking about how each member that is found here killed one another, but who on earth killed who? And if you want to, you can actually figure out who killed who. Let's hear. The riddle starts in the center on Uncle Jacob's bust, which reads, "Greed was the poison he had swallowed. He went first, the others followed. His killer's face he surely knew. Now to try to discover who killed who." Above the name of Uncle Jacob is a small circle design. The other 4 inscriptions go as follows. Birdie, avid hunter and expert shot. In the end, that's what he got. Above Birdie's name is a picture of a bottle. Aunt Florence never did a dishonorable deed, yet found face down in canary seed. Above Aunt Florence's name is a picture of a gun. The twins Wellington and Forsythia departed life while in their beds with identical bumps on identical heads. Above their name is a picture of a bird. And finally, Cousin Maud, our sleeping beauty, who never woke. The night her dreams went up in smoke. Above Maud's name is a picture of a hammer. So while you're going through there, everyone has the murder weapons of what they use to kill the other people. So the one who has bumps on the heads, obviously that's the Maud, she kills them. And then eventually one of them died in their sleep. So you go through all that, and then you get to the amazing organ that is found there. Now, the organ is a Ravenscroft organ, and if the name Ravenscroft sounds familiar to you, well, it should, because Thurl Ravenscroft is actually the voice of the ghost host. And if you're wondering who Thurl Ravenscroft is, you probably are very familiar with his work. Not only has he voiced several different Disney characters, but some of his most famous things that he's ever done is things like "That's Great," aka Tony the Tiger from Frosted Flakes. He's also the one who narrated "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch." So he's gone through and he's done a lot of different voice work throughout the years. While you are there on one side of the organ, you can find different musical instruments. If you put your hand on it, it will play the different musical instruments that your hand is on. If you go to the other side, you can find other musical instruments, but it's a little bit weirder. And if you're thinking, weird, we've talked about weird. Why on earth am I thinking about weird? Well, if you remember, we talked about Raleigh Crump and the Museum of the Weird. These designs that are actually found on here are not the actual, but they are reproductions of the actual sketches that Raleigh Crump had done, and they have it so those play music as well. As you continue going through, on our right-hand side in front of the mansion, we have a tombstone that says, "Here lies Master Gracie." And Master Gracie, as we pointed out earlier, is the nod to Yale Gracie, the Imagineer, who he's pretty much in charge of every illusion that you can find inside, not just the Haunted Mansion, but every other old Disney attraction. As you continue going through, you will find a bookcase. On that bookcase, you can find several different symbols, and all those different symbols have different meanings. Now, I did go through and translate all of them, and let me find here. Culpepper's tomb. No, wait, we're going too far. Oh, wait, welcome you foolish mortals. This mansion is your mystic portal, is on one side. Then on the other side, it says, when eerie sights and spooky sounds follow these happy haunting grounds. We also have it so there is a tomb with a person who is, he's a sailor, but he's drowning in his own bathtub, and the whole idea is that he drowns in his own bathtub. He was terrified of land, and then he ended up drowning by taking a bath on land. That is actually our first nod to the original storyline of Captain Bartholomew Gore, who was the person who would be the sailor that owned the original Haunted Mansion. Okay, we're not even through the queue yet, and we only have like 20 minutes left of the show. So we're going to keep on trying to go through. Who is supposed to be the ghost host voice-wise? We will get to that in just a second here. keep on throwing those questions out there. We will try to answer as many questions as possible here. You guys are probably going to get some free extra innings, whether we get more subscribers or not here tonight. As you continue going through, you'll find several more tombstones off on the hill. All of these tombstones do pay tribute to the different Imagineers that worked on the attraction. People like, here, let me pull up some of them. We've got Farewell Forever, Mr. Freeze, Your Voice Will Carry on the Breeze. That's a nod to Paul Freeze, who is he did his voice work for lots of different things. Oh no, he's the one who did I'm sorry. Paul Freeze is the one who did the Ghost Toast. Thurl Ravenscroft is the one who sings Grim Grinning Ghost at the end. I misspoke earlier. I apologize. Drink a toast to our friend Ken. Fill your glass and don't say when. That's a nod to Ken Anderson, who was an animator. He also worked on the Haunted Mansion. We also have things like Bartholomew Gore. Of course, that's a nod to the person that we talked to earlier. And then we have some that are things like Ezra, Gus, and Phineas. Now, while we go through the actual attraction, when we're actually going to go inside the line, or I'm sorry, inside the actual attraction, when we were going through all of the different ghosts that are found inside the Haunted Mansion, were not named by the Imagineers, with the exception of two. And we'll point out those two as we're actually going through. Besides those two, none of them actually have names, but a lot of fans of the Haunted Mansion have named the Haunted Mansion ghost throughout the years, including Phineas, Gus, and Ezra, which are the names of the hitchhiking ghosts. And so many of these names, because these fans have been so adamant about who's who, Disney's actually taken in all of these different names and had it so those characters were actually ended up becoming Phineas, Gus, and Ezra. But the last tomb that we see before we actually enter into the mansion itself is the one that has a face that actually lights up, or not lights up, but the eyes open with green eyes that stare into your soul. And this is Dear Sweet Leota, beloved by all, in regions beyond now, but having a ball. Now, Leota's face is modeled after Leota Toombs, who we talked about earlier a little bit. Leota Toombs was an Imagineer, and a lot of the Imagineers said that she just had such a beautiful face that they wanted to have it so she would be incorporated into the attraction itself. So when we get into the Madame Leota seance room, we will talk a little bit about her face. This is also one of the two characters that actually has names that we actually see throughout the attraction. But Madame Leota, aka Leota Toombs, would be the face of Leota, Madame Leota, in the attraction as well. So that's the line. We just spent 42 minutes and we haven't even got inside the building yet. Okay, but let's get inside the building. We are going to be greeted by either a maid or a butler, like we said earlier. One of the original concepts of the attraction was having it so there was going to be a maid or butler that was going to be escorting you through the entire attraction. This is one of those instances where we have it so they are bringing us in. They will bring us into our first room where we hear the famous "When hinges creak in doorless chambers." And above the fireplace, we can find a picture of Master Gracey in his living form. But as the speaking continues, you can see that Master Gracey slowly turns into a skeleton because he's no longer alive. That will bring us into our next room, which is going to be the stretching room, or the portrait chamber. Now, in the portrait chamber, we do have 4 different pictures of 4 different people. Now, in addition to these 4 people, we do also have 2 more people that will pop up when something happens. You know what happens, but still, let's pretend like you don't. Ooh. Okay, so while we were going through, you will see. Wait, what about the Mr. Toad Easter egg? That's going to be at the very end of the attraction. That's actually at the exit, so we'll get there. Don't worry. Just remind me though, because I might forget to bring it up. So while you were in the portrait chamber, like I said, the one that's here at Walt Disney World is not an elevator. The room is moving up to reveal the different paintings, but we will have 4 different people. And I do have a theory that has never been confirmed, has never been denied, about one of the people. So we have a ballerina who, when the picture extends, she is on a tightrope above an alligator. Then we have one guy who's like this, and then when it extends, he's on a guy's shoulder, who's also on a guy's shoulder, and they are in quicksand. Then we have another guy who's in a nice suit, and then when it extends, you see that he's actually in his boxers, and he's also standing on a barrel that is dynamite and it's lit. And then our final one is a older lady, and she is sitting on a tombstone that says George. And if we talked a little bit about the bride earlier, this is where we should talk a little bit more about the bride, because the bride would go through a killing spree. We're going to talk about that when we get to the attic. But while she is going through this killing spree, one of her husband's names was actually George, actually the last husband that she has. So my theory is the bride that is found in the attic is also the lady that is found here. We'll talk a little bit more about it as we go on. So at the end of it, we do hear, or the whole time we're hearing the voice of the ghost host. And at the end, he says, "Of course, there's always my way." And you look up and you can see that he has hung himself. And that is, of course, supposed to be our ghost host. And the way that he escaped the mansion that he tried to get out of was by actually killing himself. And then he ended up becoming the voice of the entire mansion. That answers our question earlier about who was the ghost, or who was supposed to be the ghost host voice-wise. When we exit that area, we are in the loading building, or the loading room for the haunted mansion. There is going to be several different paintings on our left-hand side and then to the right-hand side of the actual load vehicles. However, I do want to point out one specific one, and that is found on the left-hand side. It is probably the biggest painting on the left wall while you're going through, and it is a picture of a sea captain above or on a boat with a bunch of waves coming through, and he looks like he is going to kill someone. This picture is one of the few pictures and one of the few remaining nods to Bartholomew Gore, the original storyline that was supposed to happen of him being this guy who, owned the haunted mansion. So that is actually Bartholomew Gore, and one of the few remaining things that we have for him. Then we board our doom buggies. Who's hanging? The guy who's hanging is the ghost host. The ghost host is the guy who he's killed himself, and now he's forever stuck inside of the mansion. So the ghost host is the man that we see. That's why he says, there's always my way, and that's because that is his way. That's how he ended up here. Okay, so we get into our Doom Buggies. Now, the Doom Buggies are the exact same ride vehicle that you could find at Adventures from Inner Space, which is a Tomorrowland attraction. But the ones over there were blue, and they always face forward, while this ones are black, and they also do turn. So that way you can see different things while you're going through the attraction. Our first room that we go through are the different pictures that light up with the lightning. They feature characters like Madame Medusa, another pirate ship, again, a nod to Bartholomew Gore. And that will actually lead us into our next room, which is going to be the library. Now, in the library, we have many different stories, many priceless first editions, only ghost stories, of course. However, there are a few different things in here that we do need to point out. Number one, a hidden Donald. So if you take a look at the chair that is found on the left-hand side of the room, the back of the imprint is actually a picture of Donald, hat, eyes, and then Bill coming down. If you take a look at the table, you will find several different books. All the different books that are found on the wall are completely fake. They are painted on there, unless they are the ones that are slowly coming out of the shelf. However, the ones that are found on the table are all real books, and the one that's on the ground is the most interesting of them all, because that is a book that is entitled The Nightmare Before Christmas, with Jack Skellington found on the front. Now, the reason that this one is here is because, also I started talking really quickly. So the reason this is here is because when Disneyland started doing their overlay for The Nightmare Before Christmas in the Haunted Mansion, a lot of people started saying, well, why aren't they doing this in Walt Disney World? And the reason they're not doing it in Walt Disney World is because Disneyland is more of a local park. About 53% of the people who attend Disneyland are people who go at least once a week. Well, Disney World, it's about 2% of the people who go to Disney World go about once a week. So because of that, a lot of people who are going to Disney World want to experience the classic attractions like Pirates of the Caribbean, Haunted Mansion, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, etc., etc., etc. And if a lot of them are closed throughout the year for things like these updates, then a lot of people are going to be complaining and upset and arguing with guest relations. So because of that, they came up with a simple solution, and that is, yes, we do not have Nightmare Before Christmas inside the park. However, we will still throw nods to Nightmare Before Christmas inside the Haunted Mansion that are there year ground. So if you take a look at the one that's on the ground, it is the Nightmare Before Christmas. If you look at one of the ones on the shelf, you can actually find the Jack Skellington himself on one of the books. If you take a look at the back, there is a bunch of different head busts, and while they go through, they actually follow you. It'd be like this, I guess. Now, a lot of people have asked me throughout the years, Brent, can you please explain to me how these are done? Yes, let's do that. Because this actually goes back to Abraham Lincoln, not the president, but the automatronic. So when the Imagineers were working on the automatronic for Abraham Lincoln for the 1964 World's Fair, they came across a very cool, very spooky thing because they had only done one half the face and they put it there. And even though it was completely half the face, they were looking at it from the backside, and they noticed when they're looking at it from the backside, no matter where they look, that face looks like it's constantly looking at you. So the Imagineers said, aha, we have an idea. So they decided that they could use that for the busts that are found on the attraction. So the busts that you're looking at are not facing out, but they're actually facing in, because that allows the illusion that they're always looking right at you. So going into our next room, the next room is the Endless Hallway, or not the endless hallway, but all the different stairs. And on these different stairs, we have different footprints that are going up and down and all around. Now, if you do remember from before the year 2006, 2007, when they updated this, before that, it was these giant spider webs. And then they had these giant spiders on there. It wasn't as cool. So I'm glad that they made this change. Going into our next room, we do have the famous wallpaper of the Haunted Mansion, which is purple with several different eyes that are opening and closing and looking at you. And of course, as you get into the lighter area of the hallway, only a few of them blink until eventually you get to the wallpaper that none of them are blinking whatsoever. This is just done with simple movements and simple little robots that are opening and closing their things when you can't see the boxes that are obviously hiding the light, or the eyes that are opening up and down. When you're actually going through and you can actually see the wall, then it's a little bit more difficult for them to hide those different features. Going into our next room, we have a character that we need to spend a little bit of time on here. And of course, we're going to be talking about the Hatbox Ghost. Now, the Hatbox Ghost just made his debut here in Walt Disney World last year. However, the storyline of the Hatbox Ghost goes back to the 1960s. So when the Imagineers were creating a brand new attraction called the Haunted Mansion back in the 1960s, there were several different things that they had that were very, very, very complicated and ambitious on their part on how they could actually pull these different things off. And one of them was this idea of a Hatbox Ghost. So the idea of the Hatbox Ghost was you would have a ghost, his head would be here, he'd be holding the Hatbox, his head would disappear, and it would appear in the Hatbox. Then disappear from the Hatbox and pop back in here. So when they were going through, yay, Eric, I'm very happy for you. When Eric is a LA Dodgers fan, and they're playing right now in the World Series. So that's the score. They were down 0-5 earlier. But anyways, that's completely different. We're going to continue everything. So while they're going through and having it so when they're going through the original attraction, they did have the Hatbox Ghost there before the attraction opened up. The only people who saw it were the different Imagineers that worked the Imagineers that worked on the ride, and the cast members that were training to figure out how the ride works. One of those people would be future Imagineer Tony Baxter. So Tony Baxter, it always stuck with him that he saw this Hatbox Ghost one time and one time only, and then it disappeared from existence. If you go back to the 1960s, there was actually a giant record, the old records, a record and a storybook that would actually go through the story of different characters in the Haunted Mansion. And one of the characters that was found here was the Hatbox Ghost. But of course, they could not figure out how to make this technology work. So the Hatbox Ghost disappeared for years and years and years and years until eventually about 10 years ago, Disneyland brought him and back into the park, and then eventually they would have him here at Walt Disney World starting last year. The Hatbox Ghost is in front of the Endless Hallway, and if you look at the end of the Endless Hallway, you can see a little candlestick kind of floating in the air. This is specifically done with mirrors. So when you're actually looking down this hallway, it is a bunch of mirrors going on mirrors, going on mirrors, going on mirrors, making it look like it's going forever, but in reality, it's not. But that candlestick is found where the first wall meets the mirror. So it's an actual prop against the wall. So that's why you can actually see that, but you don't see multiple candlesticks going down the hall. As we continue going into the mansion, we go to the knocker room, which is all the different door knockers knocking on the wall. We can also find a coffin there with our first skeleton. Actually, it's like our only skeleton. And he's trying to open up the coffin, and you can hear him going, "Let me out! Let me out of here! Get me out of here!" This is actually the voice of Exitensio. Like we talked about earlier, Exitensio was the person who wrote Grim Grinning Ghost, the music for the Haunted Mansion. While you continue going through this room, there are a few different things that you can see, including on the right-hand side, you can find a picture of a tall portrait, and that tall portrait is a man holding onto a noose, and that, of course, is our ghost host, the guy that we saw in the attic. On the left-hand side, you can also find a picture of the Hatbox Ghost, his face that has actually been around since 1971. So even though the physical Hatbox Ghost has not been around since 1971, we have had the actual Hatbox Ghost picture since 1971. The next room we are going to go into is Madame Leota's seance room, but while we're entering in there, we have a clock. If you take a look at the clock, it actually has it so there's up to number 13 opposed to number 12, and there is also the tail of the demon is the thing that goes back and forth. When we get into Madame Leota's room, we have it so she's going through and saying things like spiders, serpents and spiders, tail of a rat, call in the spirit, we'll rubber the rats. While she goes through and says all of her different things, there are different things kind of floating around the room. And in addition to that, we have Madame Leota's head is also floating in a ball. Now, like I said earlier, Madame Leota, or Leota Tombs, was, according to the Imagineers, one of the most beautiful people they've ever seen. So they decided to put her face inside of the actual attraction. But her voice is done by the voice of Maleficent. So if you listen and it sounds like a familiar voice, it's because it's actually the voice of Maleficent that you're listening to. In front of her is one of my favorite details, not just in the Haunted Mansion, not just in the Magic Kingdom, but all of Walt Disney World. There is a book that is there. The page number is 1313. And if you take a look at the book on the left-hand side, it's very tough to see unless you get stopped right in front of it. The left-hand side is a terrifying picture of the devil, and the picture on the right-hand side has two different things. It's got a bunch of different spells. The spells that I'm going to try to find... The spells at the top, I'm trying to find if I can actually have the thing. Or the spells at the bottom have it so they're going through with the serpent, spider's tail of a rat, calling the spirits wherever they're at. And that's the bottom half. And then there we go. I got to look. And then the top part says, a spell to bring your eyes and ears, one who is bound in limbo. Afterwards, the spell is Kree, Crew, Virgo, Gaba, Kalta, Kree. And that is actually written at the top of this page. And you're probably wondering, why on earth are we even talking about this? This is just gibberish. It doesn't make any sense. That's because in the 1967 Disney live-action film, Blackbeard's Ghost, that is the actual spell that brought back Blackbeard's Ghost back to life. So it's a really random, a really obscure movie reference. But at the same time, when this attraction was being worked on, this movie was coming out, so it just made sense to put it inside the thing. When we get into the next room, we are going to get into the ballroom scene. The ballroom scene is probably one of the most famous scenes of all time. You've got one on the right-hand side, a ghost that is sitting on, or two ghosts that are sitting on top of the fireplace. You've got a little old lady who's in a rocking chair. The little old lady in the rocking chair may look familiar to you, but more in a deathly way. That is because you've seen her in a rocking chair before if you've ever gone on Carousel of Progress. It's the same animatronic, but this one just doesn't have any flesh. Then when we are going over to the table, you can see a bunch of ghosts that are celebrating a birthday. The one that is on the far right is the one that's blowing out the candles. And yes, it may look familiar to you, and that's because it is the same animatronic as the mayor that is spitting out water over in Pirates of the Caribbean. Then as we go down that table, you can also find a few different famous people. People like King Arthur is sitting at the table. We also have Cleopatra and Mark Antony hanging from the chandelier. And then next to them on the right-hand side is our second and only second and final character that can be found that has a name. And this name is Pickwick. So it is a character that is hanging off the chandelier like this. And the Imagineer is named Tim Pickwick for no apparent reason whatsoever. And Pickwick and Madame Leota are the only two ghosts that officially have names from Disney. All the other names that you've heard about the different characters or all the different ghosts were made specifically by different guests or the cast members. Hey, howdy, hey, how you doing? Continuing down in the ballroom, there are a few other different really cool details. Number one, the two ghosts that are up there that are constantly shooting at each other. I love them. I look at them every time. Number two, the ghosts that are dancing. You will find a few different ghosts that are dancing in a circular fashion. Number one, all of the women are leading the dance instead of the men. Number two, if the women's dresses look familiar, they should. This is because these are the character dresses for characters like Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, and Snow White, the three princesses that had films and had character meet and greets at the parks at this point when the attraction first opened up. So when those character dresses would be worn out and they would make new ones for them, those dresses would be placed here on the animatronics inside the Haunted Mansion. And I know what you're thinking, but why on earth are the women leading and not the men? Because traditionally, the men would lead if there's a dance instead of the women. Well, that brings us to one of my favorite details inside the entire Haunted Mansion. And that is, while you're in this ballroom, if you look down, if you look up, you will notice that the ghosts are below you and they are above you. And also, let's take one step back because I forgot to say this when we were at Madame Leota. If you notice, before Madame Leota, there's only two ghosts that you will see. You will see the Hatbox Ghost. You will also see the ghost that is trying to get out of the coffin. After that, you see a lot of ghosts, and that is due to the fact that Madame Leota is calling the seance to bring all these ghosts to life. So now you can actually see the ghosts. They are transparent because they're ghosts, but the ghosts that are above and below you are done because this is an effect called Pepper's Ghost. So when you are looking at these ghosts are not in front of you, but they're actually below and above you. And how this works is with the attraction below and above, there is a glass in front of you, there's a glass in front of them, and they will shine a light on these different ghosts. And when they shine that light on a ghost below you, it will appear in front of you and below you, because that's how Pepper's Ghost works. So it's kind of like when you're driving and it's late at night and you turn a light on, and all of a sudden you can kind of have like a spooky reflection of, you know, the person who's sitting next to you, and they're in the back seat now, and you're like, how on earth is this happening? Pepper's Ghost. So Pepper's Ghost that's how it works, by having it so they're shining these different lights to make it so there's ghostly images of these different ghosts above and below you. But you will notice that they're never in front of you, because in order for them to do it directly in front of you, the ghost would be where you are, and that's just not possible. So unless they shine the light on you, then you would actually find yourself as a ghost going through. In fact, if you open up your phone at this point and it starts emit some light and you look in front of you, you will see your own ghostly face going through the attraction. But don't do that because it distracts the other guests around you. The final thing that we need to talk about while we are inside of the ballroom is the organ. Now, the organ that is found over in Disneyland may look extremely familiar to you, and the one that is found here at Magic Kingdom should look familiar to you as well. But the one that is found here at Magic Kingdom is an exact duplicate of the one found in Disneyland, and the one in Disneyland is the actual movie prop from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. If you remember, in that movie, Captain Nemo, that's Michael Jackson. Captain Nemo used to play the organ inside of his submarine, the Nautilus. And when they finished wrapping that movie, they kept the organ, and then eventually the organ made its way here to Disneyland, Haunted Mansion, and then they made a duplicate for Walt Disney World. After we go through there, we go into the attic, where our storyline gets a lot more interesting. As we go through, we will see 5 different wedding day pictures, along with 5 different paintings that are constantly showing a bride and her happy husband, and then the happy husband's head disappears. And then we go to the next one, where it's a bride and her happy husband, and then the husband's head disappears. Now, while we are going through here, we will have these 5 different the 5 different portraits, including characters like George, Frank, and I'm drawing a blank on the other ones. Some of my favorite ones is the one that's on the right hand side after you turn the corner. So it's the second one that's on your right hand side. The guy might look a little bit familiar to you if you are familiar with old Disney leadership. This is actually the old vice president of Disney's Animal Kingdom. Kind of cool. While you're going through there, also the first picture that's on your left-hand side, if you take a look on the ground, you will see a book that is like completely dark. It's tough to see until the picture changes and it makes it a little bit lighter. When it gets a little bit lighter, if you focus on it well enough, you might be able to see the outline of Jack Skellington, yet another reference to the Nightmare Before Christmas inside the attraction. When you get to the end of the attraction, on your left-hand side, we do see Constance the bride, who is saying things like, I do, I did, as she holds up an axe, and in sickness and in wealth. And then she shows off a big old diamond ring. So she's just murdering people left and right for a little bit of money. I don't have a lot of money, so I am completely immune to Constance. Every time I see her, I'm like, hey, how you doing? Because I know she's not going to come after my $12.37 in my bank account. On the right-hand side, you see a little bookshelf as you're about to exit out of the attic. And if you take a look at the third shelf up on the right-hand side, you might see yet another familiar face. This is a little stuffed animal of the one, the only Sally from the Nightmare Before Christmas. Like I said, we get a lot of Nightmare Before Christmas in here because people were complaining that there was not an overlay. As we go out of the attic, our ride vehicle turns backwards and we start to go down the hill. Now, when this is happening, it is one of those things that most people don't pay attention to. They don't realize what's going on. And in order to fully understand what's going on, let's do a quick little recap. So, up until Madame Leota, no ghosts, except for the Hatbox Ghost. Then when we're going from Madame Leota until this point, the ghosts are all transparent because they're ghosts. And then you go through the window, and then you start to go down, down, down. In fact, you were going down 6 feet under, aka the same amount of feet that a casket is buried, because you, my friends, are also falling out the window and dying. So when you get to the bottom of the graveyard, to the graveyard scene, you are now a ghost as well. The first characters that you see is the caretaker along with his dog, and you will notice that they are all, or not all, they're both scared. And while they're there, they are both extremely scared, and they're looking not at the other ghost in the graveyard, but they're looking exactly right at you because you now are a ghost as well, and they are now scared of you. So as you go through the graveyard, there are so many different spots that we need to take a look at really quickly here because we're already like 8 minutes past what our usual wrap up time is. But also, while we go through here, keep on throwing questions in the comments because I'm going to go through and answer as many questions as we possibly can. I know we're already going to overtime, but hey, it's okay. Also, if you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe. So when we're going through the graveyard, there are a few different details that we want to talk about. Number one, obviously, we've got the 5 singing bust. Now, the 5 singing bust does include characters like, or people like Thurl Ravenscroft, which we talked about while we were in line. The organ is named after him. Thurl Ravenscroft is the one that looks like Walt Disney, and there's several different people who always say, oh yeah, the one bust is of Walt Disney. It's not of Walt Disney, it's of Thurl Ravenscroft. They just had a similar look about them. On the left-hand side, you will find a lady who is having dinner with a ghost that you can't see, which doesn't make sense because we can now see all the ghosts. But you can see that there's like a teapot, and the teapot's pouring water into the thing. But my favorite part about this is at one point during Grim Grinning Ghost, they say, everybody scream. And she says, everybody scream and sugar. It just cracks me up every time. Behind her, we have a ghost that's riding around on a bicycle. And a lot of people will be like, oh yeah, there's a ghost that's on a bicycle. In fact, it's not supposed to be a ghost on a bicycle. It's just supposed to be a special effect to make it so it looks like the ghost is going around in circles. And they have it so the bicycle is there because it's an easier way to make it so it looks like it's flowing. But in reality, it's just a special effect that's not fully working. It's not supposed to be a bicycle ride. It's supposed to be just, anyways, that's completely besides the point. In addition to that, when you're going past the lady who says, everybody scream and sugar, you can find yet another sailor. Yet again, this is the sailor, the ghost of Bartholomew Gore, the captain of the ship that the original Haunted Mansion was supposed to be based after. After we go through that area, on our right-hand side, we will find a catacomb. In that catacomb, you can find a ghost, the Grim Reaper, actually. And up in his left arm, he is actually holding on to a hidden Mickey. After that, we go past a fat lady singing from an opera because the ride will go until the fat lady sings. Then we go into our final stretch of the room where the ghost host says, oh, there is one thing I forgot about to tell you about. Beware of hitchhiking ghosts. They have selected you. Okay, but that's not what we want to talk about right now. Because yes, you'll see the 3 hitchhiking ghosts in front of you, and those 3 hitchhiking ghosts are trying to get your attention because they want to have it so you bring them home. But the cooler thing, before we actually get into the part where we are going with the hitchhiking ghost, is on the left-hand side of this room, you can find a portrait of a lady with a candle, and she looks kind of scared. Now, if you were to take a flash picture of this picture, yes, a flash picture of this picture, it turns into the devil, like, about to attack you, and it's the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. I've not seen it in person, but I did have a friend who did the Haunted Mansion tour when they were a cast member, and they showed the picture of the picture when it's normal, and then a picture of it with a flash on, and it's terrifying. Let me tell you, it's terrifying. Then we go into the next area where we have it. So the hitchhiking ghosts are joining in with us over in, or originally this was not supposed to have it so they were like interacting with you. They were just little figures that sat with you, and eventually they would upgrade it to have it so it was like this. Then you go up the ramp, and while you're going up the ramp, you see Madame Leota once again, but this time it's called Little Leota. We're saying, hurry back, don't forget to bring your death certificate if you decide to join us. Now, earlier when we talked about Madame Leota, the crystal ball Madame Leota, we said that her voice is not the voice of Leota Toombs, but is also the voice of Maleficent. This time around, though, this is actually the voice of Leota Toombs. Kim Irving, who is an Imagineer and also the daughter of Leota Toombs, said that there are still times where she was walking through the park before the park opens, and she's going past Haunted Mansion, and she can hear her own mother's voice calling from beyond the grave. And she said it's terrifying, and sometimes it brings a tear to her eye. When we are exiting out of the room or out of the attraction, you can see out of the wall there are different torches, and they are all being held by arms coming out of the wall. We will then go past a few different tombstones on the way out. These ones have things like, I love you, Trudy. You Trudy do. And then we have another tombstone about a guy who had multiple wives, just like the bride had multiple husbands, and how all of them had died under mysterious consequences as well. And then eventually, as we turn the corner, we get to the pet cemetery, which I promised we would get to. And in the pet cemetery, we've got several different really cool fun facts, like the dates that are on the tombstone for the cat. There was actually 9 different deaths on there because the cats have 9 lives. But up in the top corner, we also have a statue of Mr. Toad, and that appeared after Mr. Toad's Wild Ride would close up. And there is an inscription that says, "Here lies Toad, sad but true, much less profitable than Pooh." And that, my friends, is our long, actually it's kind of the shorter version of our walkthrough of the Haunted Mansion. All right, let's go through and answer some questions. We'll do questions for about 5 minutes here, if anyone has any questions out there. I know that we skipped quite a bit too, even though we went to a lot of detail. I wish there is a Muppets reference in the ride. That would be kind of cool. That'd be pretty cool if they had a Muppets reference in there after the ride. Got stuck there recently and didn't realize how many phrases the bride actually says. She says a lot of phrases. I went on there one time. My neighbor that I grew up with, it's the mother and the daughter. They came, this is probably like 10 years now. 10 years ago now. We went there and I didn't realize that the mother was scared of the dark. And she insisted that me and the daughter ride together. And we stopped next to the ride, but the mom was in the little area that it would be completely pitch black. And the daughter started like freaking out. She's like, "Oh my gosh, mom, mom, mom." And I was like, "I'm trying to listen to the bride here." I didn't get that mad. I have to be stuck on the ride so many times everywhere except on that backwards part. And I really like I'm the opposite. I get stuck on that backwards part all the time. Like when you're going down the hill, I get stuck there all the time. It's kind of actually like yesterday I got stuck there. Did Thurl Ravenscroft do Buff from the Country Bear? Yeah, he's actually did quite a bit of different voice work around the Disney parks. But yeah, Buff is one of them. The engagement ring. Yes, let's talk about the engagement ring. Okay, so the engagement ring is a really interesting side story that has it's a really random, crazy thing that most people. Did you see that fall off on the thing? I had it in a different spot today, and I was like, hey, it's gonna fall at some point. I'm shocked that it lasted that long. So the engagement ring has a really interesting storyline. So when you are going through the queue, right over by the tomb of the sailor, if you look in the corner, you can actually find a small little engagement ring. It's a ring with like a diamond on it, not a real diamond. But the storyline used to be, or it still is, that the bride got so upset she threw the ring out the window and it got embedded into the pavement. And that ring was put there in 2011 when the extended queue opened up. But prior to that, there was another thing that people made the story up, again, a fan-made story, about the bride throwing the ring out the window. But this time around, it wasn't a ring. It was, if you looked outside, I actually saw it in person. There's like the different poles that hold up like the different stanchions that make the line. There was one that used to be out by the exit and they tore it up. But when they tore it up, it made it so there was a ring imprint on the ground and they never filled it in. So people started making the story that it was an engagement ring because it did kind of have that shape. Like it was like a ring with like a little like diamond shape coming out of it. And people were convinced, like absolutely convinced, that it was a detail that the Imagineers hid, when in reality it was like, I think it was someone, if I remember correctly, I could be wrong, but I think it was someone in one of the electronic vehicles ran into it and they broke it and then just they had to take it out, and that it made it look like it was a ring imprint on the ground. And then also people were like, it's the engagement ring, and it kind of took off from there. Okay, it looks like that might be all of our questions. So that was a very detailed look at the Haunted Mansion. I was a little worried because, like I said, if you missed the start of the episode, I was literally at Epcot, not even 15 minutes, or it was like 20 minutes before the show started was when I left the park, and then I got to my car and got over here with like 11 minutes to spare. So I was like, I want to do a Haunted Mansion episode tonight, but I'm also kind of scared that I will not be able to pull it off, but I feel like we pulled it off. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. As always, tonight's episode is sponsored by our foolish mortals, the Patreon pals. Thank you to our Patreon pals. If you're one of our Patreon pals out there in the chat room right now, give us an oh yeah. Also, thank you everyone out there for joining us. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you want to read more about the Haunted Mansion, I do have a lot of writing about it in my Closer Look book, a closer look at the Magic Kingdom's Liberty Square. So make sure you check that out too. We will be having another book that I'm going to be working on after we end here in a few minutes, called A Closer Look at Disney's Animal Kingdom's Dino Land USA, with an announcement of the date coming up pretty soon on when it happens. Not yet, but it will be coming pretty soon here. So just kind of, yeah, we'll see. But thank you everyone for joining us once again. I hope everyone out there had a great night with me, enjoying all the different details. As always, if you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe. And until next time, remember that anything can happen if you let it. Have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye. Goodbye now. Goodbye. Bye-bye now. Goodbye. Goodbye. Are they gone? Are they gone? Oh, good. My cheeks are just killing me. I just can't stand this kind of